Kind of going into a quick summer through here, aren't we? And still the crickets. Just not enough. And I'm learning new things all the time about us, just people. What we think we know, what we don't know, what we think we do, what we don't do, what we just don't do. And it's really not good enough, generally. We really have to consider doing much, much better if we, I guess we could sit and complain perpetually. Somehow that just doesn't seem correct in a way. Why? Why have any thought at all if that's all we're going to do is complain? And then when we get to the point we want to throw our hands up, why? Why do you continue? I've thought about it myself. Just didn't do it. Don't know why. It seemed important to stick around. And by making that decision, it's kind of put me into, it actually did put me into a position of having to take action. And we're here now. In the Weekend War Report, every week now since NDA, and Battlefield America was declared, I hear not much of anything going on. And a lot of people who are even engaged roll up their sleeves. I'm finding out we're really a bunch of people that have no capacity to respond, actually, on some pretty simple things. And I'm not saying that in judgment. I would really hope and wish for a whole lot better because we need better for us. And those of you tuning in, RLM, Real Liberty Media, thank you for Grimner for all the blues he plays, blues music, and he plays before the broadcast. It's nice to listen to, and then I can put that and layer that over UCY.TV's broadcast that I can pick up on. I'm in and out before the broadcast, preparing and doing other things like this week. I've got the yearly ant invasion coming on. Treacherous pirates, arch enemies. Apparently, try to be cool, try to live with them, and I found out they're like mice. They make a mess and they chew the place down, and you just got to stop them. So we've been in battle with them, and that's what I run in and run out, trying to make sure that I slam them back far enough to when I finish the broadcast, I got to run back out there today and slam them back off because they have the hordes and hordes of invaders coming. And it reminded me that's what we need to be. It's persistence. I just can't believe literally. I got these giant carpenter ants. They look like pirates. They're coming out of everywhere. They just come down and they descend on this place, and you just got to be knowing how they're doing it. So there's a whole lot of interesting corollaries between battles we have to fight and the nature against us, and not necessarily against us. I wish I could truly coordinate our communication to say, just go over there, don't come here. But that doesn't happen. And so now you see another rule of the reality. There's always somebody that wants your space. And if you don't defend it, they take it. Pretty simple. And that's what's going on in our societies anymore. And we've been crickets to our responsibility about that. And I find, again, as I got into mining law, I focused my focus, because at the time I was looking all over the place. I was looking at all kinds of things. I didn't actually go down the path of what I see people doing in trying to seek remedies out. It's just like shotgun approach, where we hear, we're going to do affidavits, we're going to file UCC documents, we're going to do all this stuff, on and on and on. It goes on and on. I took a different trail, and it put me into a different space, actually. And I never really grabbed up and embraced a lot of what I heard. It didn't mean that all of it was wrong. So you have to kind of you learn to go through find the value like anything. Again, look for the babies out there in the bathwater that are muddied up by a bunch of noise, and it's done. We do that ourselves, and we have others come and do it for us, so that the terrain is obscured itself. They come and bring the fog in. They bring the noise. And so we have a lot of things against us. And even so, I sit here every week hoping more people come to listen, to understand how to apply the things that I'm telling people. Is really not, like I said, I really don't have an opinion in some regard, actually. And I don't know about, at some point you have a knowing, and then there's the limit of the knowing, and that's important to recognize. And then you still think into the unknown. And that's where you anticipate. That's where the anticipation comes from, looking back at how people respond and how people don't respond, actually. And at that point, you're looking at anybody who's coming against you. They're responding to your inaction. And with whatever I've been able to pull together, it's given me tools, and I can, at a distance, understand a condition, even described to me. And you can do this yourself, is just start paying attention to this and engaging this condition. You can listen to someone's voice talking about something they were experiencing, and you can actually tell the one, if they were talking about interacting with somebody who you have a question of whether what their integrity is, the one you're listening to could be in danger. You can hear the other party's integrity through the one that's responding to you, sufficiently to be able to formulate a plan of action, which is what we do here behind the Woodshed. I try to bring all these like news articles. It's notice of the target-rich environment, and I just ask you to choose some place, because that's up to everybody. Everyone has their own things that they just do or don't like, and things that are more pressing or aren't. And so we all have to, and things that you have liabilities that you have to be careful and guard. And like I've said over and over, behind the Woodshed, we don't lead with our jaw. We don't lead in liability. We don't jeopardize ourselves at every turn, but that doesn't mean we don't act. In fact, I'm developing as I do this. We learn more and more ways to protect ourselves, despite the universal, uniform, and that's even in their costume, universal crime that's going on against, I think, all peoples, actually. So before I move too far on, appreciate the comment, communications too. You have to have a lines of communication between yourself, and it has to be secure. I've been putting talks on the website, on the Blogcaster page, and I found out here from some people that were trying to download it, that apparently there was a problem with the download. So I went quick, didn't know anything about that problem. Well, come to find out, it's not a problem necessarily with talks. There is an organizational problem. And so anybody who's been trying to download talks and been requested to put drivers in, because I don't remember ever having to do that for my talks. That's a communication messaging service that you can, it's a Skype alternative. And right now I mostly use it for file transfer more than actually talking to anybody or chatting with anybody. But it's secure, and it's been coming up more and more and more as being one of the preferred messaging services. That there's an organizational problem that's developed, not with the program, but with what was going on with the people that were making it. And somebody, it finally came out here just about the time that I was being told that there was having some problems with the download. I wanted to convey to you that there's a new site that they've developed to get the binary program that you'll use. So they had a slight problem. I went back through about a month or two back, and I changed the download for the Talks messaging program to be the new and current one. And so those of you that tried and attempted and got this message for needing drivers, uninstall that. It doesn't appear to be a problem, and at least by the Talks people are saying it doesn't appear to be any problem with this organizational problem they have. So that I'll just uninstall whatever you have, and then go to the regular website. You'll get in the Blogcaster. It'll be in the Skype as an alternative. Talks as an alternative to Skype. Link at the bottom of my Blogcaster entries. The link for the new program, and it ought to just download and ought to just install. And it's really not much different than Skype, except you have a number, an encryption identification that you need to tell people you have, that they can put in theirs, and then that makes the account. Once you get that account, you can change that number to a name, and then it's really no different than a talk. So, like I said, I don't do too much of that, but it's been, at least for the broadcast, it's been fascinating to watch how fast I can transfer files between the systems that I've got, and how fast I've been able to send files out to people. It goes pretty quick. So just from that standpoint, I've been kind of, it's kind of a fun thing to watch. A whole lot better than Skype was. So without all the liability, I see it as. And as I've said, maybe some of you, you want to stick it to the man, so to speak, and it's a legal entity, a group of people behind a legal entity, so it's not the man. And this is where they get us all screwed around in our brains. But at any rate, you want to stick it to the man, and you want to go ahead and use Skype just to tell them, let them know you're not afraid. Well, I think a little bit differently, and I know this is a preference, I suppose, but for what I do, literally, and what I read to you, I'm on notice all the time that I've got to privatize more and more and more of what I'm doing. And what I do, when you finally get in and start doing it, you'll start finding out, and this is the other thing, you'll find out how important the stuff is that you need to keep quiet from people, keep out of people's faces, not because you're a criminal, but because we're in a war, literally. This is the Weekend War Report, and I bring how to engage it. If you choose to be a sit-aside, you want to sit behind the computer or whatever, just go. I don't have a problem with sitting in the sun or getting tans or enjoying the beach and all. But for me, when I look around, you keep doing that too much, you're not going to have the kind of life. You go to the beach too much, you're going to come back one day and not recognize the place that you thought you lived in. If you haven't already seen all that we need to start engaging, and we need communication lines between ourselves, that the information that when I got involved, I started to find out if we started to be too open, and if I can say open and honest with exactly what we were doing, not honest that we're dishonest, but honest with exactly in the moment where we are with what our endeavors are, I found out there's a whole bunch of people that'll come in and interfere with that. Either out of ignorance or out of spite or out of really being the other side who needs to interfere with you. And when we started to take the idea of let's go a lot more quiet, let's go more private with this, that interference went way, way, way down. And so this is, again, experiential to you. It's not an opinion on my part. This is we can go say this is knowing. This is a knowledge. And this is knowledge applied and then explained to you that I hope, every week I come here to try and explain through the notice and the news. The stuff they want to tell you is reality. There is a reality in it, but it's not necessarily exactly what they're telling you. And you can use that to anticipate the future. You can learn to anticipate the people that you may come against you. And I say it in that regard because anybody who's not against me is probably my friend or could be, and we don't have problems. And so we're back to the invasion of the ants. I mean, once a year they come. Well, in the case of life, man versus man, they're not bashful to be in your face every day. And if you're not, I guess anybody who's really dealt with an invasion of army ants, an army of ants, not an army ants, but and actually numbers of different species of ants, you'll understand how tenacious you have to be to thwart nature. It's pretty impressive, actually. And so this is, I guess, it's just an object lesson, maybe for me. I just persist. I don't even question. I just know that I have a job to do, if I can say it that way. I see a wrong that I'm finding I need to make right, and I'm working as much as I possibly can to, as I'm allowed to, actually. I take every opportunity I can. It doesn't mean like I'm a robot machine, and you can't be. I do. I mean, at some point, it's kind of an interesting diversion to go to try and keep the ants from taking over the place every year. I have a diversion, if you will, have a small garden. I can tell you this year it had to go a little bit smaller. I got too many things going on and too many natural critters to have to deal with. I reduced the words just slipped from my mind. I reduced my vulnerability to what all nature can do to a garden, and I'm going to get some stuff, but it's not as much. I've got too much more things going, so it's always a balance and an adjustment. And I use that time to kind of let my mind free up a little bit, but I don't go do much. I come back and I go to the battle again. That the talks is important for serious. This anonymity. Is privatization of your actions is really what I'm focused on. This talk's about, and Skype is not doing it. And I don't care. There's nothing and no ego in me to say I'm going to stick it to the man by saying here I'm going to tell you what I'm going to do anyway. And take that Microsoft and take that NSA. I got nothing in me to say that and to think that that's important. And I have every knowledge to know that they are in a position that if they wanted to, if you were important enough, they can reconstruct a life that you never lived, and then now you deal with that. But that's just another reality. So, Talks has an organizational problem, and here's a lead into a discussion. You'll have a link later current situation on this is the Project Talks. As many of you in the Talks community have likely already heard, a serious situation is brought to our attention, which has forced the Talks development team to disassociate itself from the Talks Foundation, along with its sole board member, Sean Qureshi, and a bunch of names that he goes by. We learned that Sean's own admission that he took a loan against the Talks Foundation and used the entirety of the foundation funds on personal expenses completely unrelated to the project. He did not inform anybody about his actions prior to taking them, then proceeded to disappear for weeks once we found out, ignoring our attempts to contact him and get an explanation. So they go on to explain that this was an internal thing, an organizational thing. Someone took advantage. It ends up boiling down to even a loan, a usury loan. The greed, I guess, the potential. This is what kills people. It's why you don't hear me talking about donations for me. I don't even get into the money side. In fact, there is no money. Although I have received donations of silver coins, and those a long time. Thank you very much. I don't put even out how you get a hold of me. So the point is I don't let this taint come in to what I do, and there's no excuse that someone can use against that. That this seems to be another root of evil, if you will. It's this people taking advantage. The Talks people got hit by that, so they're wiser, and they just moved on over to talks.chat. And they have a blog.talks.chat website that you can then get to the download. So long explanation to say I really think it's a serious consideration for you to whatever medium of encrypted communication. If you're going to get serious about going against the system of people that have allied themselves against you and to essentially destroy you, come as a horde of ants to take over your place and chew the wood out and make channels everywhere and dilapidate your system, and you're going to sit by and watch that. Well, I don't know what to say, but if you're not, you're going to need to move into the real world here about what's going on. And right now, I know it's a beta system, but Talk seems to be a fairly it's an OTR-based system. It's at least as good as it can be at this moment. It may not be foolproof ultimately. I don't know. I haven't got into the backside of that. It'd be too much for me to figure it out. Maybe you too. But for right now, it's offering some measure of privacy while you are actually doing something. And I'm telling you that it's amazing. I stopped talking on forums because of this nonsense. You let people know. I just want people to know the information, the black and white, the knowledge, the things that are really out there that they could use. And as soon as I get into a forum and just expose it, you get everybody coming out. The ants coming, the termites actually. These guys are termites coming out of the woodwork to gnaw on you. And try to destroy and cause question in other people. And so I said, I'm going to stop that. That's just nonsense. I'm just going to back off. I don't need to tell anybody. Anybody who needs to know will cross my path. And they do, but I wish there was more. And that just tells me why I continue to bring the crickets. Societally wise, we're not responding. And this is going to be important as we move along. Information is important. Who gives it to us? You have to qualify now everything. As I've said before, science is prostrate before the truth. We can't even rely on our science. In fact, I've told you that you're going to be as good a scientist probably as anybody who studies anything in earnest and looking with that wonder into the world. When you realize one thing certainly hasn't changed when I was wanting to get into science is if we finally got into learning about astronomy, the very first thing that they would tell us is that we get into astronomy now and we ask a question, we're going to get like 10 more questions coming back. We're going to answer one and get 10 more questions. And that was really the wonder of what we're dealing with our own reality is, as looked through these very narrow senses that we have gone through. And I wonder about that evolution side. We haven't even done adaptation too well. You'd think that with all the energy that's out that we could perceive, we'd have more than just 6 senses or 5 senses if you only go, what was it, 3 senses now? How many little few do you use? That's the whole point. We have these senses that we're not even paying attention to, and there'd be a whole spectrum more that you would think we would adapt to if we were adaptive that way, and we didn't. However, we're told certain things, and this idea of evolution and intelligence and science, and I don't know why science and creation and all this so-called, the God factor, whatever the creator you think is, and I don't even have a point to make anymore on that. It's really, we're here now, and we better, my example would be the example of somebody to go through at least and make the world a better place despite its fallen nature. There's guidance I take from an example, whether or not I can actually believe the references made, and we say you called Jesus Christ. Well, there was an example that this mythical character did that I think is head and shoulders above anybody else, that I've kind of reduced my whole belief system into a reality of saying, okay, that's a guidance, and I'll just be the example that's trying to make the better world despite the fallen nature. And I don't have to get too riled up against it, because if I start doing that, I divide myself out of those that don't agree with that. And we're not here to divide ourselves, and yet we tend to do that. That there seems to be, and I don't understand why science would be at odds with this, whatever the reality is, but it seems that science comes, man-made science is no different like the Inquisition and the Vatican and Galileo, and all of a sudden now religion now has to tell everybody what reality is, and someone says, but he has another observation and says, well, wait a minute, it doesn't look like it works that way, and so now he's a heretic, a criminal. You'd think that these things could be mutually exclusive, and they're not. And when they're not, I say to you, be careful, because it's somebody taking on too much to try and explain too much. They can't. That I've always been intrigued about science, so-called, trying to find life on other planets, and I think this week it's starting to come out. Why? If I didn't really pay much attention, but I found these two stories. There's actually a third one I didn't capture. Very important this week that came kind of in turn. The second one was that Earth-like planet is found 1,400 light years away. Now, I understand 1,400 years traveling the speed of light, and you'll go into this. You'll finally reach this planet. So it's completely absurd that it would have any bearing on us. But why is this Earth-like planet being found? And why is it they want to find these Earth-like planets? Now, I understand can we find life? Well, it's interesting. What is life? Is it us, or is it just a microbe, or what? I mean, there's a whole range of things also. That people, scientists, I was wondering, why are they so focused on trying to find an Earth-like place? But we've also heard that there's maybe aliens, right? And I'm not going to get lost in all this, but except to say, I think we're looking at an interesting adjustment. There's a lot of people that want full disclosure on UFOs. We also know the Vatican is not against alien existences. We also know that the Vatican has made and updated an observatory to witness certain things in the space, and they're not being tight-lipped about it. They still are. But this week come up this story about the 1,400 light year away planet-like, well, Earth-like. That's kind of, what is that? These terms are just catching our fancy here. They're really not defining much of anything. And how can they really, really actually know that far away? Actually, they're still having trouble with a duck-shaped asteroid, right? And what were those shiny spots on Ceres? I mean, it's nonsense to think that this is much of anything, except this is feeding into a psychology, I think. And I think we're starting to see what. And I don't know what this is going to end up meaning. I just want you to be aware of it. So if they do start to do this, don't get lost in the fascination of it. I'd be really careful if this really does come out, because something else is coming down that's going to be, it's maybe what Reagan said. If we got attacked from outer space, that would unite us all. That's what the system of things wants. They need this universal governance, right? They want, and the universal church, as I'm showing you, is actually a financial construct through the green religion, the green cross. It's all this Soviet type thing. It's central control, no property, you are property kinds of things. But right before that finding, and we've been told that there's going to be this, there's always this hint that there's going to be some disclosure coming, and the people wanting disclosure. Well, right before that, there was a report a couple days before that, that the United States government released documents with details of extraterrestrial bodies, craft, and home planet. And it was a bunch of communications that were done back in the 40s and such. And through this article that I'll have, it relates to, it says go read page 21 and 24 to 24, I think, or 23. And I went and I downloaded the PDF and I read it. And in fact, they do speak about what the title says. That there is reports and interesting evidence and statements within the document that say that this is going to be dismissed because of what the subject matter is. That people are going to dismiss this out of turn. But in fact, that we have evidence of the details of extraterrestrial bodies. We're talking physical humanoid style bodies, not the celestial planetary bodies. Craft and a home planet. Now, the home planet was interesting because it's, when you read it, it's not actually a home planet like in this so-called dimension, in this so-called reality that we feel. It's actually translating into another sphere, another dimension, if we can say that. So this story came up just days before this big promotion about the 1,400-year light-year away planet, Earth-like planet. Now, the Earth-likeness of this is not even news, but they're making a big deal about it this time, wrapped around right after this other document where the FBI actually releases some evidence. And so I started to look at this and think, I said, now that would be cool. Whatever happens, happens. Whatever is. But they use this stuff to take people's eye off what's important. And there's just a ton of stuff flying around right now. It's hard to keep track of really what's important. This is kind of earth-shattering in a way, because they're already also now, the next story, and I don't have a link for this, you can find this yourself. A scientist comes out and says that if life, which is not defined, they didn't talk about other humans, those little animals, or even man, they don't talk about life being that, which is really the constraint for us. They talk life in generality, and now we're finding out that inorganics can appear to be organic, so be careful on that one. But this scientist from the government comes out and says, if this planet has life on it, it destroys the concept of God, whatever you think that is. Now, then they use a false interpretation of whatever the authorities are that are being used by people. And that was kind of like the crux. That's what kind of focused me on these. I wasn't even going to talk about this, but that's what focused me on this as a coming potential deception. Be careful as we hear this, to not be persuaded to believe and embrace too tightly what appears to be the dots being connected to persuade you away from focusing on what's important to you and getting enamored and being actually driven to do things by what they're saying. Remember, they are shifting your belief system, your idea, your awareness of your own reality slowly over time. You understand the Catholic Church is not really a religion that way. It's a control construct. And I told you I could see coming from international law, it was integral. Despite when you come from international law, you don't see these connections. You see it in the words and who's involved. That despite the Catholic Church not being a financial construct, I said a long time ago, but it will be the core to this new financial construct. It will be what this green religion. Well, what this green religion is, it's a universal religion, which the Vatican is attempting and has been on the move to make. That where they're transitioning ourselves. See, the Vatican never took on that there were no aliens. It's pretty loose about how it doesn't define certain things, and because it doesn't denounce them outright. That when they're trying to, there's a movement, there has been over time, to move us from this. Most people say it as the man in an old man in the bearded man in the sky. I think that's a trivial description. Demeaning the real importance of what could be coming down here over time as well. That it's the old bearded man in the sky. They're transitioning this over into a world Earth Gaia-based belief system, and you see this happening in that encyclical. It's very subtle what's going on here, but I see these three things together as a move, and I will not be surprised, though I can't really know. This is one of those things you think, okay, this is a category that when I've now made this observation, I'm going to be listening, although I won't focus on it. I'll be now listening for this eventuality as a focus to be able to say, okay, be careful. That's the new shiny thing. We're a bunch of groupers, right? We're a bunch of fish. We herd together. We like shiny things. We like the entertainment, and we will be focused on these lures that get dropped into the sea of humanity. That we will act the fish nature, that the animal nature that they've defined us to be, because we didn't stop that termite from entering into our reality and eating away at our manhood and our womanhood, in preference of personhood and or animal hood. And if you're an animal, they're being the animal husbandman, and they are the one that are taking care of the animals, as that belief system of record shows, as was supposed to be done by man. So it was, and they use the word stewardship now to tell you that's what they're doing. It's not husbandry, it's or being a husbandman. It's actually, they've converted that word to stewardship, as they treat you and your environment as an animal that is, as I told you, I think it was Title 7, if not Title 21, the United States Code. They treat man not just as an animal, they treat man as a pest animal, worse than the worst pest. If you look very carefully and read very slowly, you'll see this is a federal law now, what the government, these people that come through the offices have done to us. And I hear crickets. Crickets aren't even a pest here at this point. You are. And so there's a dynamic I see going on. I just want to speak a little quick, not so quickly now, but I wanted to point these things out. We've heard about Earth-like planets. I've always wondered why that's such a big deal when they can't really prove anything. It's just a big hyperbola in some regard. Not that I don't think it's important, but to come away with ideas and conjecture that is actually important, and we start to focus our attention on, that's our trouble now, because our attention needs to be focused on what's happening in our reality where we live. Not 1,400 light years from now. And be careful what you wish for. If you got an alien people that can fly in space and get here and overcome our gravity, I don't think we want to know them with the current state that we're in. So let's be very careful what we ask for as we search for intelligent life outward. Well, intelligent life, that's an interesting word, intelligent life. All life seems to be pretty intelligent in an innate way. It's fascinating. Fascinating. And our so-called scientists have trouble just keeping up with the most basic things. In fact, I just found out, I'm trying to remember, they just found out all this time, with all this technology, they found out there's a certain minuscule nerve channel. I think it goes from your eye to your brain or something. They never knew it was there. It has profound, I don't remember, I wish I could remember now what the thing was. It has profound meaning. This infinitesimal channel has profound meaning in the holistic nature of our body and how it responds and reacts, that they didn't even know to check when they're doing anything regarding pharmacies, pharmacological things or surgeries or anything. That they had no clue. An infinitesimal system, completely, almost controlling in a way on certain functions of the body that they didn't even know was there, just ramrodding through. So I'd be very careful what we ask for a lot of times, and be very careful how much we do know. And so I've kind of related myself back to, okay, what of my, let's go to the macro body, my environment. It's a wonder, micro-wise, how this thing functions all by itself. And then we have the reflection way out. Our brain cells look like all these nebula out in the sky. So we have this interesting unifying connection in reality that we have no clue over, that we would start to focus on the aliens in that. What's alien to that? First of all, it's all a big unified system. But be careful on your limited sensors, and someone else's expansion on that, their ability to evolve if we go there or adapt to larger sensors, would put you at a very large disadvantage very quickly. that I don't know that we should feel we're so, if we're going to go ahead and go down this road, I don't think we should feel we're so high and mighty, despite the fact the United States can go and beat the heck and pummel just about everybody, and probably everybody right now. I don't think so. I don't think so. I don't know that we're if this is, you want to get out of God and say this is reality and that there's a whole continuum of existence, I don't think I want to be standing up there with my hand up saying I've got the best capability in all the universe. Now we need to humble ourselves. And if we're going to start there, we might as well humble ourselves about where we sit and how we treat each other. And as I've said before, as a model, as a reference, when Cain killed Abel, when brother killed brother, I looked at that. When it finally hit me, when I finally started to sort stuff out, I realized that, look, there's the fallen nature we're told about. We have, as people, we are in serious trouble against each other. We have that to fix. That we need to necessarily stop listening to those the institutions and the people that are using these institutions to gain favor by fear, intimidation, and dread. You're going to lose your soul because you don't believe what I believe. You're a heretic if you don't, and because we have all the army to come and beat you down. If we don't get out of that mentality and find out that that's the first harm, we're going to maintain that revolution of global slavery. We have internal to ourselves our own servitudes anyway, but they seem to translate out as a defective gene response as we move it out through our actions, our interpretations, our knowledges, our applications. What I tell you, you can be knowledgeable and not apply right. Knowledge is not power. It's knowledge applied that's power. The absence of knowledge can be a complete disaster. That this next story also has, in the context of alien and extraterrestrial, and on two levels. One is this allegiance thing that you end up having nationality-wise, and the destruction of that patriotism, if I can say it that way, without the negative connotation. The actual, because I believe in the what appears to be at least the rudiments, the foundation of how the United States was put together. The government was a limited form to protect the people in their property, and that use of the property was what was the actual value in the world, and again, proper use of that is how we actually example the manifest the creation in the physical form here. That they are the ubiquitous the people in the positions of authority that a lot of other people have given sanction to by not denouncing them. They have been trying to tear down the walls, so to speak. No borders. As I tell you, the IUCN.org group, the horde of international water trespassers, they don't believe in borders. Doctors Without Borders, they don't believe in borders. These people, you'll find your research, these people are not actually very good. UN is the first one to go in to make it look like there's peace that they want to keep, and they're the ones, the first infiltrators into a nation to tear it down and destroy it. Republic of Congo is an example, if you just want to go research that little tidbit. A nation that was reflecting itself in the more true nature of the United States of America as a republic, Republican form of government, was destroyed by infiltration of the UN under peacekeeping, and the United States did that to them. Fascinating what our real history is. I saw this next story, and it just triggered this whole thing about alienship and the lack of borders and the one world government and the governance and the displaced religion. There is going to be one universal religion. Then you are not, again, I've told you this before, why we have to have borders is no different than why cells have a cell wall. You got to keep the outside world from the inside world, because something that's happened on the inside is complete, distinct, and separate and unique to the rest in generic uniform space. That's why we have to have borders. Why that makes sense to me. And if you don't have borders, then you don't have property. Why that certainly makes sense to me. They're trying to destroy this idea of nations and ideologies and ways of life and all this thing. And then this story comes out right after the FBI shows and records of reports and sightings and all this of bodies and crafts and alien nature, of a world discussed that's not of our dimension. A fascinating idea. My mind triggered right back to the wave-form interaction I was telling you about them finding out about the sun, that it comes in waves, and it comes as a waveform difference that changes our environment here on Earth, the climate, so-called. The climate that changes, not based on man's infinitesimal contribution, but because of that big, bright, hot ball out there, however far away it is, that they're trying to break down the walls. They're trying to break down the internal walls as well, the states, when we have this so-called the border bash that's going on, and we see this, the unqualified one, for those of you that haven't tuned in before, that's the who they call Obama, that he's been showing that his administration is willing to take out, ignore any immigration distinction. That this next story is telling of where they're going, how far along this thing is. That we really have to pay attention. Obama changes oath of allegiance for new Americans. Now, this new Americans is a capitalized term, so it's something new. It's been in the news. I've been watching it, but they're really starting to promote it. New Americans takes out pledge to defend the United States of America. Newly naturalized Americans will no longer have to pledge to defend the United States thanks to Obama administration's decision to remove the lines requiring new citizens to bear arms on behalf of the United States and perform non-combatant duties in the armed forces in times of war. Now, I'm not necessarily engaging that you have to do this. I think this actually is showing you a truth. I don't think that anybody who is free is supposed to be required to file an oath of allegiance. Because I believe that your allegiance to your environment and way of life should come naturally. You don't need to file. That oath is with yourself and those around you. That I'm not necessarily saying that an oath of allegiance is required. An oath of allegiance is really kind of an interesting problem. If you go read about oaths, anyway. Swear not, folks, is what we're told. And if you look at why, you'll find out why that's written down for us to pay attention to. However, where there is a requirement to defend the United States, and they knock it and they take it away from new Americans, you're watching the destruction in the future coming of the lack of the prior system and the adaptation to the new, which is going to have no borders at all. And the only way they can do that is if you're under one rule. And it won't be your rule, because if there's no borders at all, you do not have a say, by definition. Again, we go back to might makes right. Whoever has the biggest club, and right now we're being clubbed by the Club of Rome, and that policy, and those people have made this work, and it's fascinating to watch that they have made it work, and no one has said anything. Crickets everywhere. This cricket is a land of crickets. It's amazing. It's just a world of crickets, actually. These people are actually making this thing work. That this is your heads up, folks. This is becoming, there is no allegiance to any national construction. You don't have an obligation to defend. You won't be doing that in the future. That will be being done to you. Remember, human rights, your animal rights from the UN, is only so much as it benefits the governing power. Don't lose these simple little points. That this becomes, to me, very important to understand. And it's a whole study that you can do. I mean, my mind is just racing of things not to say because I can't say it all. I couldn't get through this broadcast to explain it. That it's right there to go find out what is going on. The addressment on the other side, that they're actually conditioning passports so that you can't freely travel. That's an interesting problem. See, this is the migration. They're keeping the herd from migrating. They don't have a right to do so, but no one's saying anything else, so that's how they get away with it. But they're curbing your ability to move from this place. See, the other thing about that is that there is no place to move from once there is no borders, because you're in the same jurisdiction. What there is now you, because there is no privacy, there is no property, there's no defense, there's no exclusive use to you. You now can be moved around like the herd animal that you are. into the places that they want you, like you saw happen in the European Union. That was the model right there of what is going on across the globe. This is really not that hard to see. What is harder to observe is the numbers of continuing crickets despite this. And here's the point. I hear lots of people complaining. I hear lots of people pointing the fingers. I see not many actually doing what they need to do. And it drives me nuts a little bit. And I know it's difficult because I'm dealing with it all the time. People I can explain how to go through something, it's like it's a foreign language. As a people, we have been allowed ourselves into a dysfunctional capacity, even for the easiest and most simplest things, to the point that it looks like a steep hill to do the most simplest thing. And so we don't. Partly I don't know why I continue doing the broadcast, but on the other hand, I know why I do the broadcast, and it's for the same reason, but the other side. And I don't know why I care, but I do. When I say that, I don't have any sons or daughters I brought into the world. That didn't happen for me. Lots of things happened that did not allow that to happen for me. And yet then I got to a time I said maybe it was better that it didn't happen. Maybe it's better I don't bring someone into this hell. And the hell is that people would rather let the hell come on them than to stop it. And I'm saying that in generalities. There's always going to be the remnant, as we hear. Those that just aren't going to put up with it, and yet you're just not powerful enough, and you have to kind of watch as you go through the battlefield how you proceed, always trying to be that next point that you never know when the battle breaks out and it happens, that you are ready to go. That this idea with the aliens and coming on and no allegiances, and then hearing things about the Reagan era making decisions with what we were told then was deals with the aliens and what their interpretation was, and even though they are peaceful, that there could be no borders may be a driving thing. That I think all this coming together, it points in 3 or 4 different directions, outcomes that we really don't want anyway, any one of them that I wanted you to be aware of. All this comes together for me, and it starts to point to a possibility. The probability of which rises with the number of points that are defining that. We have this one world condition coming, and underneath a distant bureaucratic rule, the rights and properties and rules of which for you are dictated by the needs of the many, and you'll never really be those needs of the many anyway. It's really the plunder that's coming down through the colors of authority, which are all felonies. For the United States, if your allegiance is to the United States, see, you can't get anybody for treason if you don't have an allegiance either. You can't even point out to the guy that's destroying your country that he's doing that, because they've taken that away. And so you see, the occupiers are taking away your future methodologies to point them out, like we've done, that I've done in a lawsuit, that we have done, that we can now show that's going on right now. There's nothing hidden that we do not respond to. That, again, as I talk about this economic order that's been in the world, and it's been moving through that under the skin, and, they make up this IMF and the World Bank, and folks, anybody wants to watch this stuff, see how you're being done, go to the World Bank and go to their toolbox, their website. There's a toolbox that you can go to, and you can see all the ways they've laid out plans on how you subvert your own governments. In other words, how you cut your own throat. If you were believing like me, you're cutting your own throat. But see, these are people that don't believe like me, or like any of you that might believe in property and your right to have a space to operate in, an environment to operate in that's distinct from anybody else. Not part of the Borg, as we hear, not part of the hive. There isn't any such thing in the future by this point of the IMF and the World Bank having designs on your countries. This is not just one, all of them. They have a toolkit on how to subvert any function within a government. That should be arrested, and it's not. Should tell you the pervasiveness of this condition within your own countries. That I was telling you that what they've done with the economy is that they had to go global. They still have to transition it, I think, 2 more steps, unless they can make a leap, which is possible. They could do it. This carbon tax is kind of on the surface and it's having some trouble, but they could get it there quickly without going interim to an interim medium. I told you that what's going on here with the IMF World Bank condition, by a monopoly can't cause change so well because it's the monopoly. It's the one that's causing the trouble. It can't allow people are focused on its singular and manifest actions as the authority by itself. It's as if I see the king wears no clothes. So what you need to do, and what you'll see most everywhere, is there has to be a duality. Less esoteric. Democrats, Republicans, blacks versus whites, yes versus no's, gun rights versus anti-gun rights. All these things. They got to set up a duality. When you set up a duality, you've defeated whoever engages it. That they needed to do this on the economics world, and they set up the BRICS. And I told you this. And I told you that they would be set up at a confrontational level. That the promotion would be an antagonism between the two. Although I've already trumped all that, and I'm not talking about this clown coming through the election process. All that's another facade going on, a lot of noise. I see lots of time wasted about this guy trumping. He's going to trump America, folks. But anyway, going back, the BRICS was developed to be an antagonism, so-called, a promotional antagonism to the IMF World Bank, so that the protagonist in this story, the theater, can be set up at any time as the evil which the system needs to defeat. And yet I trumped it last week by showing you that the internal people are already administrators of the IMF World Bank in the BRICS. So the story is done. The end of the story is done, but people didn't pay attention. I found this pretty fascinating. This week it comes out that the promotion starts, just as I told you, the rivalry. It says it right in the title. The BRICS countries just launched a rival to the IMF and the World Bank. Now, we know from last week that's just not so. And yet here you see the public promotion of the protagonist in the story. The future evil, which the hero is going to have to step up, and you all will be wishing, you'll need your Batman, your Spider-Man, your Superman, your Fantastic Four. You'll need your superheroes, which will become future into the IMF, World Bank, or its derivatives. See, they can adjust this as well. And it's all on the stage of the play that we consume. And here it was this week. I told you coming in a couple years ago, when BRICS was becoming something. I mentioned this is a pseudo rival. This is what they have to create in the story to make sides to choose from. And it's all set up. So here it is. It's the news. We don't have to know whatever. If I was whatever question you may have had at what I said before, or never thought about it, or didn't even agreed with me. We've got the fact it's being promoted today, at least this week. The BRICS countries just launched a rival to the IMF and the World Bank. It's not, but that's what they're saying. So now everyone's got some protagonist to hate in this scenario as they move us through the domestic and international money systems. They set it up and move it around, bring in SDRs, actually going in through carbon taxation, and then plunder your life a different way, all because you had to take care of what damage you've done to a world that you were a part of. Remember, I've told you the encyclical identifies you as an animal with human rights, which is only the rights subject to the farmer, in this case, the global ranch, the herd that you're in, that they will put you where they need you. That's your rights. That's the limit of your rights. That they need to be able to put you where they want you, and that will be partly done by the need that you have for finances, which is why I say you need to get back to a foundational of a measure, a way to measure that we were told is important, why it's written in the Constitution of the United States as an example to us of what restricts the actions of deceit and plunder is way to measure traded amongst ourselves. We have to do that ourselves. We have to do that ourselves, because it's not what's going to be done against us is the silent weapons of quiet wars, big data, Bitcoin. All right. Now, I told you I don't fully understand Bitcoin. Maybe that's a problem for some of you that you think it's the greatest thing since sliced white bread. I don't know. Yeah, it's cool. I like it. I like the generic idea of it. I've talked about this before, but there's a major problem. First of all, it needs an electron, and when they steal that electron to give you, to transfer that electron, they've stolen everything you own. It's not actually what it says it's supposed to be. It is going to the cashless society, they said. And what's the problem with that? Not a biblical term. It's the fact that they went against weight and measure. And it's vaporous. It's an electron. That's the problem. Here one day, gone tomorrow. Whoops, mistake. Gone. And it's gone. You know, we see all these things, these videos. There's brilliant videos coming. What's going on? And we have lots of people that don't understand this. So I say, find some medium that you can trust amongst yourselves and start using that. That this will circumvent all of this, except when they get the carbon tax. See, they've identified you as the cause, and we're back to what I've been talking about. The Pope is now sitting in the seat of decision on your being a heretic and not caring enough for the world, that you're harming her. And you need to be paying your penitence with the tax. And they completely divorced themselves at the fact of the existence of the sun. So we're looking at the Pope versus Galileo 2.0 is on the horizon. And they don't care. And what I've said before, you don't matter, right? And so here it is again, another thing, another proof of all this. You don't matter. Of all these things that they want to talk about having a healthy environment, they allow companies like Monsanto to run roughshod over that environment. So you don't matter. They don't care about you. And here it is. You don't matter. House votes for Monsanto's rights to deceive consumers. This is everybody. No, Monsanto's the only one of the corporations. Here, this is a report about the fact that the Dark Act, what they're calling, what's being called the Dark Act, the Deny Americans the Right to Know about GMO, has been voted by the House of Representatives, H.R. 1599. They voted against the truth and transparency. But see, this is transparency as you don't see them coming. They're transparent to you. So these words are done by people that maybe don't necessarily understand the dynamic, but I'll read it anyway. These politicians voted against the truth and transparency, against science, against more than a century-old right of states to legislate on matters relating to food safety and labeling. They voted 90%, even though 90% of the Americans are in favor of mandatory labeling of GMOs, they voted against the producers of non-GMO foods. They voted against you. Now, this is for not labeling. So I'm on record. Don't label. I say just ban the GMO, because they do this stuff. I talked to you about the labeling before, over and over and over again. But so what's the answer to this? And it's always, let me get back to the method. Wherever this system of plunder and destruction and control of your life goes in one direction, you have to go the other. So what's the point? They talk about it right here, consumers. Now, you're going to be considered a consumer no matter what you are by them. So you can't get really away from that. But so you can act in that regard. You can take that status on. And what would be the best thing to do? If the Congress says that the states, regardless of the legal ramifications, and since no one's going to step up and argue that, make it invalid anyway, I mean, if you could, anybody could stand up and if the Senate was to pass this, you could move to some court to determine its constitutionality. You could be the one on the platform that puts the right answer forward instead of the one that they argue instead that gives them what they want. You put the right discussion up and see what the government's going to do, and you make a political platform over it. But even so, if you don't want to do all that, there's other things. If they're going to say, and if you don't petition your state to recall your senator, then the senators will be able to vote this in if they want. And you see, the Republicans are not helping anybody in any of this. I want you to remind you about that's what's going on here. Democrats and Republicans are just burning the United States is a candle, and they're burning it from each end. They don't care how they burn the candle, but they're going to go from their direction. They're going to burn it from the left, or they're going to burn it from the right, but America's going to burn. And so these kinds of actors sitting there, they don't care about you. I've told you that over and over and over, and it's just not a statement. They don't care about you. And for lots of reasons, and the reason is because you didn't step up and make them care about you. And I don't mean forcing someone to recognize you, I mean taking them out when they didn't underneath their establishment. And there's tons of ways to do that if people get involved, but they want to go ahead and say that they can now peddle poisons on people. Well, I think, I think the best answer going away, if they're going to say that the states can't and no one's going to step up to argue that the federal government has no right to impose the lack of disclosure or to form deception on people as their right retained, and no one wants to step up under the 10th Amendment to argue that, then what you need to do is get in a consumer movement that says, okay, if you don't have a label that says it's non-GMO, we ain't buying it. So you go ahead, now they commit, and now you just go put on a public opinion direction change that they can't compete with. It's pretty simple. Just make sure that the companies know if they don't have non-GMO on it, you won't buy it, and don't buy it. And that goes for about everything. And that goes to the point and limits of even, there's a discussion of whether, like Chipotle restaurants, they want to say that some of the products that they use are not GMO, yet they're derived from GMO organisms. The material they have is not GMO, but it's derived from a GMO organism. And they're trying to say and claim in one instance and in one respect that some ingredients that are GMO, and in others, like in their cheese, where they use rennet that's derived from GMO organisms, is not. And so they're playing both sides of the fence at some level, and you're also given notice of how difficult it's going to be. The cost is going to be for all the companies to be able to try and find non-GMO. That's how pervasive this poison really is, and why the government of the United States, in regulating the commerce amongst the states, said, well, you can't label because that's going to hurt the bottom line. We can't have that happen. So that's part of what I say. You don't matter. They don't care about you, because what is the bottom line is what drives this. And this will drive why we heard this court case come on, moving into different ways, that you are the subject. You're going to have more and more difficult problems as long as you continue to make mistakes and don't step up in the right way. Now, a court case goes in, it's the wrong court case, it makes the right decision for your wrong question. And this is how they do it, too. Court declares air fresheners, pro-police stickers as reasonable suspicion for cops to pull you over. Air fresheners and pro-police stickers, like a DARE sticker, is probable cause to pull you over. But in this report, I just want to point out more to the point. These people were stopped on so-called traffic, that's commerce. But notwithstanding all that, you've heard me talk about that narrow use and how people are being mistaken in their argument. They're also very ignorant. And in this case, we have another problem again, an ongoing problem where someone allows a search of their vehicle. In this case, they found money, again, the confiscatory thing they're going to steal from you and to support themselves under Article 10 of Libre Code. That's, by that deed alone is martial law, that if you have a ton of air fresheners, and remember, folks, if you have a beard, you're a terrorist. If you don't have a beard, you're a terrorist. This is where this has gone. And so now it's hit the road. They got a bad case law done by a dumb case where someone actually gets there because they allowed, partly because they allowed the search of their vehicle. So we are doing this to ourselves. And so now you are going to have to pay for that. But it doesn't really matter, really. They make this stuff as they go. Remember, when we found out about community caretaking, you can't even look too stiff sitting in your car seat, and they can pull you over. So this is the world you've allowed, because no one has argued the more correct option, and then that also, as we're finding out, attack those decision makers because they're the occupier. That your use of the road is not regulable to these standards, and that their characterization of a commercial nexus is in fact a fraud and a color of law, theft by extortion in order to exact these things from you. Would be a much better discussion in my mind. Those of you taking notes. I mean, I say this stuff and people don't really, I don't think they appreciate what I'm saying to people about how we have a better way to engage this nonsense. And we need to get that word out. And that's partly why my disappointment, I don't see, great numbers, not because I need to have people listening to me, But because what I'm saying that I'm doing, or we're doing, as people that I help, is starts to break down the oppression. It starts to break down the occupier. And we just need more people doing it. That this story now, it lets you know, they let all the humans know, all the little animals, human resources, human capital. They keep telling us, folks, that you can't even have air fresheners and a dare sticker, and they can pull you over. And one more case that they get down that the cops are going to use to justify their plunder. And a lot of that is because you don't respond correctly in the moment, you don't respond after, you don't persist, you don't challenge properly, you just use the system that they have set up for you instead of utilizing the system that they have not told you is still sitting there. Less esoteric, less obscure. Pre-plea remedies and avoidance are very, very cool. They don't like them, but they're there. And it takes an awful lot of study to find those. You just find them by courts dealing with them. And that's what the problem is there, but they're there. That was a big awareness for me. You probably won't even find that term, pre-plea remedies and avoidance. But it's there, and that's what's available that everyone needs to be doing. But they can't make the mistakes in the first instance that lets these people get over on us and put it into where they go. And then the other aspect is I've been trying to tell you that they have this power, but there's a limit. There is this limit. Not everybody gets picked up, and not everybody is a victim. And not everybody relishes them in their victimness. I notice this is in videos too. Look what I was able to do, and I only got partly in trouble. Look how I stood up for my rights. And I listened to the nonsense. It's just nonsense here. You didn't stand up for your rights. You didn't sneak away from anything. See, if you get stopped wrong, you still have an obligation to go back and make a complaint with the local. The work's not done. You got to make a complaint with the local officials to put it on the record that they did that. First, for two reasons. One is to make the formal record of the violation. Two is to start making the record that they're going to start. They will use their actions have to become a harassment, and you start that record so that eventually they have to stop that. What you're doing is you're just keeping your interaction with them away. That's the first thing you want to do. And so while they're going to integrate themselves with you, you might as well make that record. And if you don't, you're not doing anything. You're setting it up for them to do that to you again without record. You're not putting on the record the question of an act that mischaracterizes your lawful use of the road with a regulable use of the road. Now, where do you find that out, folks? What have I told you? Where do you go look for that? The motor vehicle code? No. That's the regulable code. That's the use that's regulated. You go over to the state law that talks about your highway law. What are the use of the highways for? And you find when you research back through there, they're from a grant to use those roads that did not have a regulation authority reserved to the state or the federal government. And if you look at the federal government very carefully, everything's in commerce that they're doing. In fact, I think if you look around, you'll find most of your Title 18 crimes, so-called, are commerce-related crimes. No one focuses on that part. Like I'm telling you about pot marijuana, the 420 crowd. Private possession was never illegal. What they did is that they put on a commercial nexus, which made it illegal. And no one, crickets. There was just complete crickets for decades and decades. So we got a commercial nexus that no one throws off. And the only other thing I can do in a pre-plea remedy of avoidance is trying to not let the system get a hold of you, is you start telegraphing it's going to get embarrassing. And the only way you can do that is making records. And if you're already involved, you have nothing really to lose here. If you're not yet involved, you have nothing to lose to make a record that shows a problem on the governmental side. And shows you there's another limit. If they have a problem and they can't proceed past the problem, then there is a limit. And you have to go get that for yourself. They're not going to give it to you because you don't matter if you don't. What you say, and have no power to change, doesn't mean anything. What you have a power to say and show them up does mean something. And it even comes out to the biggest dread in most people's lives is the IRS. And here's a report. IRS apologizes after seizures hammer small businesses. Top IRS officials, under intense pressure from Congress, apologized on Wednesday to small business owners for seizing their bank accounts after they structured bank deposits that just barely avoided federal reporting requirements. So you can't even comply with the law in this prison we call the United States of America. The FEMA camp of which is your neighborhood, for those of you thinking it's coming. Remember, when I noticed that you're in one jail, and it's only thing that's going on is you're just being more confined into lesser ability to do something until the point of isolation is all you have. As long as you go along with the program, you got the most liberty, the most freedom. It's not being free. And if you do something a little bit wrong, you're going to be put into a smaller space of activity, and or first they get you to pay the fine. And if that don't do it, they stick you in a jail cell. They stick you in a cage. And if you don't like it there, you don't follow the rules, they stick you in a smaller cage. So that's the continuum of our existence that people haven't figured out. But at some point, I found out even in that system, there are rules that they still follow. And I had heard this somewhere a long time ago that it's the third rail for every legal system, every judge, every cop, everybody, to mess with anything that has legal material written on paperwork. The term legal material is like, for that context, it's the magic bullet. That even though when I did my documentary, they picked me up to destroy my documentary. They had to get rid of me for a while so they could go find out my documentary that was going to expose child services and the pedophilia you now hear about, and the sex abuse that goes on, and then the smiley face about foster families and all this nonsense. Well, they found out about a project I was doing because I was using public access, and that word got out. Well, they had to figure out a way to get rid of that project, and they did. I got blindsided on that one. It took me a while to figure out what actually happened. But anyway, they threw me in on a trumped-up charge. It was a traffic issue. And again, you can't do everything. Everything I was doing was lawful. It was right by the book, and it doesn't matter. That's how I started to learn. This is this is about 25 years ago. 25 years ago. I learned that it doesn't matter inside the code. There's other things that you still have to do. Embarrassment works, but there are limitations. And one of the things that I found out is if you put legal material on any paperwork, notwithstanding I was not supposed to have a pencil or the paper itself, that somehow I got it, I was able to put legal material across my paperwork, and that one day saved a whole stack of notes and paperwork that I had been writing. When they came in, they rousted me out of my cell. And this is all prior to plea, folks. There wasn't even a charge on me. They couldn't get my name. They couldn't get nothing. But they rousted me out, and they took my pile of paper, and they threw it away. And I went back, and they finally got me back in the cell. I went immediately to my papers and found it was gone. I went right back out, and I said, "Where's my legal material?" And the eyes on the officer, who happened to be a female, got about as big as a saucer. And I was able to eventually, in just a few moments actually, have her tell me that she had taken my legal material and threw it in the garbage. And I had already known about some of the power I'd been told about this stuff and interfering with your defenses and all this other thing. That knowing that was the third rail for them to keep from me. That she told me where she threw that away. And without any permission, because you get in the side of the jail, you got a permission to look and blink it sometimes. They get it down to that's your regulation is where do you look and when? When do you sleep and when do you don't? When do you feel comfortable? When is your temperature down to 0? When is it too hot? When is it muggy? They dictate your life. That's the regulation when they finally really want to decide for you in your life to show you you aren't free. That's where the constraint goes. That they were not able to throw away my legal material. And when I proved, they told me, this is before I showed it to them, that the legal material actually saved my legal material by simply finding the limit. They have a limit. Now, so the limit, to me, becomes this embarrassment point that I listen for everywhere, and you need to as well. That it got so bad that these IRS agents going after people who were actually utilizing the law, when they were finally brought before some scrutiny, had to fess up. The seizures actions that are usually aimed at stopping drug dealers from moving large amounts of cash out of the country cost the business owners tens of thousands of dollars to undo. And they got caught. And again, the drug war rings loud here, doesn't it? Laundering. This is also part 326 of the PAI-TIC Act, whatever, the Patriot Act, that was undone and redone to make it worse. This war on drugs has got to stop. The war on terror, it's a war of terror. The IRS is a dread in your life. I don't know of anybody dealing with the IRS that doesn't think it's a dread. A system of government that rules by fear, intimidation, and dread is the definition of terrorism, folks. The IRS is the definition of terrorism all by itself. That you have to understand how big it is that they are forced to apologize. That also shows you a limit. To anyone who is not treated fairly under the code, I apologize. IRS Commissioner John Koskinen told a congressional panel. But how do they find out about whether or not that's the fact, folks? They have that seated decision as well. So this is a little bit of a hollow apology. The point is he did do it. What I want to point out to you is not treated fairly under the code is what I told you, at least to lead with your first step, was to do what? Well, first of all, read the code. This is the tax code. The thing that's about impossible to truly understand unless I will tell you to focus on due process. And it's not that hard. Now, how do you know that you've been not treated fairly under the code? Is you find out where they failed to follow it. And in due process, I don't know of anybody that I know corporations that have had this happen to them. I don't know of any man or woman that has ever happened this, and I don't know of any man or woman that's ever challenged it when it wasn't when they were set against. Or any small business man or woman. I've never heard anybody say this. The point of due process. In the code it says you have to have a meeting. And that meeting is supposed to be whether or not you're the person liable, and they're supposed to find that out, that you are the person liable, and that your activities are subject to the tax. And that meeting is the orientation as to that fact, what the entity is that has the obligation, and the order to make records and keep books and where to keep those books. And I hear nobody challenging the failure of the code requirement that the IRS does never do and gets them into this condition. That I only hear them stealing the money as being apology. I don't see them identifying that they violated these businesses' rights underneath the code to even bring them into person liable status without the meeting. For those of you taking notes. So these agencies can be shown to have a limit. And I guess this is the small silver lining that's in this tyrannical storm. There is a limit. And it's up to you, whether you get it or not, I don't know, but it's up to you to insist on it, demand it. And don't take no for an answer. Team up if you have to with people to get these kinds of things where the Congress finally gets made aware of it. We're actually doing some of that. We need more people to do more, but we're actually able to give information to certain congressmen, essentially driving. They're all of a sudden they do something. It would have never happened without our input. And when they did something, it was favorable. Why? Because the information we gave required and gave the guideline that they had to act and meet. We didn't leave it open, like these hollowed apologies that come out. Apology nonetheless, but hollow just the same. That these agencies have limitations, and they have oversight. That this next story was kind of interesting to me. Justice Department watchdog complains he's been curbed. The Justice Department internal watchdog said Thursday that his independence has been undermined by the department's refusal to let him see information derived from wiretaps or national security letters without permission. This is an Inspector General that Congress, the office of which Congress created in the Acts for the Inspector General Act, I think of 1978. This Inspector General wanted to know about the DOJ's information over wiretaps. the DOJ came back and said, the information you're asking for is not subject to the act. And what I found interesting was that this was news at this point at all. When I read through some of what they wrote, because the report's available on the link I have, it actually shows, if you look at one part of it, that they have to be careful that this Inspector General has power of investigating fraud. It seemed to me that if wiretapping evidence from wiretapping is misused to prosecute, that the DOJ could be got for fraud for doing that. That was within the Inspector General's authority. They denied to him, under some mealy-mouthed discussion of the limit of the Inspector General Act, that what I find interesting is this became public yet already. Seems to be a setup. Justice Department watchdog. He's the Inspector General. He's already been to Congress and been given more authority by doing so. That why wasn't this just brought to the court? Okay, you take that position. I have the power. I need the court to declare that if that's going to be an issue. Or go back to Congress and have them make the law. He's already done it once. Why are we even seeing this? It's really kind of a question to me. But this seems to be a whining. It's like self-induced. It's this other self-inflicted wound we keep agreeing to. If your agencies can't be oversight, there's no oversight for them, you're seeing the evidence of no limitation. And yet there is. And then they make a game out of it. The system itself starts to make a game out of it. You can tolerate that by sitting back, or you can say, listen, the Justice Department can destroy your life. This is not a menial problem here. That I think this Inspector General is whining a little bit too much before getting with it. He's got the power of arrest, and he's crying over this thing. And so here we have it. Here we have, there's an issue made. I don't think there's an issue to be had. And yet nobody comes to even support this guy. And this is kind of close to my heart a ways, because we are dealing with agencies all the time, the Inspector Generals of which we will have to communicate with. And I look at this and say, if this guy's going to start whining already before he's done anything, what are we going to go to him for? See, it changes. I said you have to understand the battlefield you're in. This changes the complexion of the battle we may have to wage. We actually may have to challenge this guy for not being effectual. And what am I talking about here? We're attempting to build the case. The government has become not effectual. It has not been serving the people. Isn't that what we need to prove under the Second Amendment? Isn't that what you need to prove under your own Constitution? Say that in your states. That the government has ceased to function to serve the people. And we have to do it beyond opinion, because these people, criminals, will say that's just your opinion. We don't see it your way. So you have to produce the fact. Why I say it's important to make records. Make correct records. Again, I saw this story. I thought there's something wrong with this because of the power that this guy has been given, and now he comes whining and he's been curbed. Has he? Or has he just stopped? It hasn't gone into the next function. Did somebody interrupt this too soon? What's the story we're being told? I think this is a continuing problem within the government, that it ceased to function to serve us. Congress has the same problem, directly. Congress will bemoan the fact that they can't control the agencies, and they have the purse, folks, in the House of Representatives. They can make laws to require accountability, and they don't. So this is just a self-inflicted wound, a wringing of the hands. It's not necessary. The government has failed to help you, the people. That if you stay silent to it, it maintains at least this level of mediocrity. At least. This is mediocrity at what I think about this part. But who they're talking to, those are the people that can kill you. Those are the DOJ. That's the people that can kill you, destroy your life. They use the IRS to do it, right? So this is very serious when it comes to the news that I don't hear much action on. And there's a ton of news, I guess, it could go by, but people don't pull these out as important, at least in my view. That would be another place for more people to respond. Again, I think there's enough population in the United States of America alone to deal with this if we were to make that important. And again, I'm John Whitehead. We talked last week about an article. He wrote another one, The American Nightmare. I just find it interesting how over time everybody describes this condition, this, in similar terms, the nightmare, the tyranny of the criminal justice system. So here we have Inspector General who's whining and crying about they're not going to let us have information, instead of just going and doing what he has to do to force it out of him if he can, or prove that he can't, and then go to Congress to make sure that he has the powers that he can. With the power of arrest for fraud, I'm having a hard time understanding what the limitation is here. But the tyranny of the criminal justice system is that system that Inspector General is having trouble cracking. Justice in America is not all it's cracked up to be. Again, another article, I could read it. I think you need to read it. You find out he's saying a lot more consistently with what I've told you already. The consistency of Mr. Whitehead is coming up better and better and better, and I think it's important that he's a voice, despite the fact he's an attorney, he's a voice of, he's the bridge between the system and what he sees as a failure. He's probably one of the guys that were attorneys, of the four people I know that were attorneys, that were my friends, that are my friends. But they are not now. He's probably the same kind of guy. He came in on the good reason and found out the plunder that it was really set up to be. And he's a free spirit. He's realizing that this is not the way it's supposed to go, and he's coming to terms with it. But in his coming to terms with it, he can lay things out for you. And I say that when you're laying these points out, these become causes, these become evidences that you pull together to prove your point. That you need to do when you're making all your records wherever you talk with a supposed authority. It's over and over. The same method that you can do. And so what happens when you get people inside that are actually looking like they're being the check and balance? What happens if that Inspector General finally gets it? What may happen to him over time? Well, we may have some proof of what happens. City Fire's investigator who found cops at fault in shootings. A Chicago investigator who determined that several civilian shooting. Remember, the word civilian alone tells you we're in a military construct all by itself. Actually, civilians are defined as the attorneys. So this is another interesting review. If you rethink everything you read here by these different definitions, and there's a different thing they're telling you, and it kind of gives you, again, this possibilities and probability condition and categorical review of the society you think you know about. A Chicago investigator who determined that several civilian shootings by police officers were unjustified was fired after resisting orders to reverse those findings, according to the internal records of his agency obtained by WBEZ. Mr. Ando, Scott M. Ando, a chief administrator of the city's independent police review authority, informed its staff in a July 9th email that the agency no longer employed supervising investigator Lorenzo Davis, 65, a former Chicago police commander. Now, this is highly unusual. You got a commander within a thin blue line commander who is actually finding civilian problems, and the problem with the administration here, the police authority, the independent authority, was that he was prejudiced against the police. Davis's termination came less than 2 weeks after top IPRA officials evaluating Davis's job performance accused him of a clear bias against police and called him the only supervisor at IPRA who resists making requested changes as directed by management in order to reflect the correct finding with the respect of OIS, as officer-involved shootings are known in the agency, to show you that these people wasn't so independent inside their system. And for his resisting, it awarded him with a firing. And so this is again indicative of that self-serving system, not so independent. And I bring that word independent again. Remember, your judiciary is supposed to be independent. Now that's just an excuse to make you believe that they're independent from any kind of influence, external influence that would bias their decision, when in fact they come from a biased condition. And we tend to forget about that part. that this embarrassment, or the systemic embarrassment, is affecting people within the system, particularly these American lawyers, so-called. They're just attorneys. I don't think there's a lawyer one out there. Even a solicitor, who is the only officer in law under United States Code that is a law officer, a solicitor. The only one that's supposed to know the law is a solicitor in the United States. Figure that one out. Who are the rest of them? That's why I tell you they call them all attorneys. And I found the solicitors don't know so much either. Now, again, the narrow view of property disposal is where I'm talking, maybe a little bit farther out, but they don't know. They don't know the law. They are people that appear to be lawful, that give themselves and have been given the credit to be the law. In fact, they're not. It's more part of the illusion. And you don't know this more than my statements until you have worked with it. See, I want you to get to the point where you're engaging it so that you can articulate this as a knowledge, not an opinion. In other words, I say this is coming and ringing very, very true. As I've been telling you, you need to see the black and white in your eyes. For everyone that's never seen the black and white in their eyes that I help, that took my word for it and didn't do the work after I explained how that worked and wrote it down, helped them took their work and then amplified onto it and said, now go read the places I've added so that you know what your actual point was. For everybody who doesn't do that and then got challenged, they failed. For everybody that read what I told them and understood it, and usually I know because they come back and have a question, and I get to work that out, they prevailed. It's that cut and dried. If you don't read the stuff yourself, if you think you can talk through somebody else, when you come to the point of having to act, you don't know. And not to disregard, William Roberts, great, fantastic host, information, but there was only information. When it came down to a code violation that he got from a code inspector, he had to learn more than an encyclopedia would have told him that he read to you. What I helped him a bit on, well, this is before he passed on, but this is the point I'm trying to talk about. It's just not reading the black and white. It's actually moving with it and having to deal with these people and what you learn from that interaction. That is what I speak from when I say it's possible. It's not possible if we don't. It's impossible if we don't. But we're starting to see that all these people from inside the system are not with it as well. It's not 100%, and I'm happy to see a lot of this. But this is notice to you of how much quicker you're going to have to come to bear with this if you intend to protect yourself at all, anywhere, anyhow. Policing, mass imprisonment, and the failure of American lawyers. Very interesting commentary. I think it's just some soul-searching done by an attorney that I think you need to read to see that this is systemic failure from policing and imprisonment. That's the system that the DOJs are in command of your life over with immunity. That the attorneys that we've been told are supposed to be in there to help protect us, we didn't recognize the fact of their existence was a failure of protection. And then they're not capable. And then they don't take it to heart. They don't take it as if it's their property. In other words, they don't take it as if when they fail, they have to go to jail. And that would be a big deal to change. If we could get that to happen, I think they say there's an excess of lawyers anyway. Maybe we'll weed through all the bad ones and finally get to the good ones. But if they start having to pay the price. It did not surprise me that almost every child in a D.C. public high school class raised a hand when I asked if any of them had been stopped and searched by police. When I told them that being stopped without reasonable suspicion that they were committing a crime as a violation of the United States, one of the students corrected me. No, you don't understand. These are jump outs, not the police. They're allowed to do that. I'm used to people laughing in disbelief when I do constitutional rights training in heavily policed communities, but when I heard those words, my heart sank. In front of me was a child in whose world being stopped and frisked was so regular, such a fact of everyday life, that he had reasonably concluded that it must be lawful. This child was growing up believing that his suspicious body could be probed at will by government employees. One by one, the students described to me the routine that they had developed to turn and face the nearest wall while officers searched through their backpacks, pockets on the way home from school. Like many of the problems in the criminal legal system, there is no genuine dispute that these and more serious illegalities are happening on a massive scale. In the 7 years that I have been spent working in American courts and jails, one thing sticks out above all else: the divergence between the law as it is written and the law as it is lived. And what I'm asking you to do is read the black and white, that's as it is written, and enforce it. And don't accept as it is lived. And if you didn't just hear described an open-air prison, I don't know how better to describe an open-air prison. And they're teaching the youngins. What chance does the future hold? What are those future generations going to be like, folks, under human rights with this kind of a mentality? That this one attorney is finding out what the reality of the occupation really is. That we do not have a system of justice. It's just like the War Department. It's really the Department of Defense is actually the War Department. It's this this turn of a phrase. It's a euphemism. Black is white, white's black. You can't really tell, and we buy into it. And we see the little ones now agree that they live in because we called them jump outs. They're not law enforcement. It's really not even the point of how to argue that. It's the point that that's what's going on. That's your battlefield. That's the reality. And we have allowed that. To the point now that the infiltration is just everywhere. And this is just interesting to me, how they can make this stuff up. They make up all kinds of stuff, and they're making up this one. So be careful. And I'm not saying not to do this, but you better be careful. I mean, you better figure out what it might cost you. Clearing your browser history may be deemed obstruction of justice in the United States. And I find that fascinating because we just asked the FBI agent, we through our chairman and BLM law enforcement, so-called, we're identifying probable cause-based felonies. Are you going to arrest that? And they said, no, we're going to arrest you if you try to stop that. So they're not unwilling to cause obstruction of justice, but they'll blame you for it all the way down to clearing your browser history. Pay attention. Boston Marathon bomber acquaintance, folks, could get 20 years in prison for deleting files. That's all I'm going to read on that. We accept this nonsense. Nobody challenges it. And if you don't protect yourself about that, you're going to be caught up at some point. It doesn't look so bad right now because it's not quite that integrated, but it's on the horizon. Here's the future, folks. It's right here. We're told it's here, and there's where it's going. Nebraska bans death penalty, defying a veto. Was kind of interesting news, but the criminal justice system now will have license to put you in for life, and it's just as corrupt. When I saw how corrupt the Department of Justice system was in this country, in any country actually it seems to be, where law and democracy rule, the death penalty had to go out. And you hear me respond periodically with the people that are being in jail for 25, 30, 35 years, exonerated. We put this justice system on a pedestal. It stops serving the people. It's only serving the occupier, and I hear crickets. Notwithstanding that, Nebraska on Wednesday became the first conservative state in more than 40 years to abolish the death penalty, with lawmakers defying the Republican governor, Pete Ricketts, as staunch supporter of capital punishment, who lobbied vigorously against banning it. So, those of you in Nebraska, when you get violated by the justice system and they get you into a death penalty condition where you could have before, now they'll just keep your body in a cell for the rest of your life until you can prove that they were wrong. And I wish you all the power and the luck, and wish you some people calling themselves calling themselves lawyers that do become lawyers and help you out, because once you're in there, you're pretty much toast. Well, you were there. You were going in. You were, remember, a human resource. So there it is. And the private prison complex here is going to be working that out. Now, crowds attacked Florida cop during arrest. People are starting to rebel against this injustice, and this is I don't really necessarily like seeing this stuff. My thought is to get in there earlier, get inside the system before this becomes such, but people are not taking it, and this is the people stepping up, but this is them doing it as mob. See, this is the mob rule thing that comes in to place. A crowd of people in Melbourne, Florida, had enough. During an arrest recently, passersby circled an officer trying to make an arrest and began fighting him off. The arrest of a Phoenix Low 22 took place last Saturday over minor ordinance violation. Violation, folks. There's no time in that, just a fine. More money to secure the police force. That's martial law. The idea of arresting Lowe seems so ridiculous to the people who witnessed it that many of them jumped in the fight to fight the cop off of him. So, won't go on more, but this is now coming down to the point that people are taking action immediately, which I kind of agree with in a way. The problem is that this guy's out there and he's been allowed to believe he can do that, and all those people actually should have went in, stopped him, maybe as they did, but then turned around and made complaints. And warned the system that we're now watching you. This may not go well for you. Why? Because there's more of us. And force the system to start serving the people. As long as we don't, see, we put ourselves in jeopardy by fighting that cop. So I'm not saying to fight the cop, and I'm not really saying don't. I mean, you have to arrest a felony if you see it. Remember that. The crime's on you if you allow a crime. So there's that balance. So when are we going to step up to call it out that we don't have mere violations causing the problem? Remember, we're allowing this onto us. That people are taking law. They're taking the law in their own hands because they don't feel that there's any justice in the system, and the lawyers have failed, and they were planned to fail. I guess is another thing. Look at the system of the bar, and you'll see how pervasive it is around the world. Remember, the United States goes and beats people down to impose the rule of law and democracy. The imposition should have stopped you, but it doesn't. I'm talking generalities now, nobody in particular. That people, when they feel that they have no alternatives, they just start taking law in their own hands, and it's really maybe not the proper way for us to respond. I'm asking us to learn a little bit better and do it a little bit better. Get ahead of this. Don't let it become a problem like this. That people have it in them to be able to affect law. They want to call it. See, the Bar Association to put a violation on us that we can't take the law into our own hands when, in fact, we have to at times. And so you see remnants of that throughout the news as well to remind you that we still have this ability, and we have to position ourselves within that frame of freedom, the constraint. Within that constraint, there's ability to enforce law. Defend yourself, essentially. 3 scumbags try to rape a granddaughter. Grandpa blows holes in them. For those of you that are kind of squeamish about what goes on, is because there's no actual law enforcement, and it's actually becoming the plunderer, then other people and then the gang step up and saying they get their piece too. The good news first, when 3 thugs attempted to rape his granddaughter, Grandpa grabbed a gun and blasted one of them to hell. The bad news, the hero, 67-year-old Kenneth Bird, was seriously injured in a shootout with the 3 scumbags who invaded their home and terrorized Bird, his wife, and their teenage granddaughter. Was a story to tell you how serious it's getting and what you're going to have to be willing to do, and potentially the harm that can come. And you need to put that in your mind squarely. The arms to defend yourself, to have one. If you haven't thought about it, you shouldn't have one. And when you think about it, it becomes a very heavy responsibility to understand what that tool is going to do and what it's to be used for. Now, the other side, the government, has given itself license to execute people. You're not so fortunate. There's accountability on your head. and it's a strict liability. There is no corporate liability, limited liability here. So pay attention to that. But here it is to remind us we have law we have there's a higher law, if you will, to what we have to do. That I would ask us to step up, but the government's always going to seem to be always there to try and take away some of your abilities, and within that week or so, I think I got that report came that the Supreme Court allows the ammunition ban to stand in San Francisco, banning hollow point ammunition. And so this is where you see you have a right to bear arms, but they say, well, but we're going to tell you what kind of bullet you can have. Now, I don't know where that right actually exists. But this is the Supreme Court taking the decision based on the facts they got to come up with what they needed to have. You know, the Bar Association and those legal councils and those universities and those appellate courts all are affiliated with the Bar Association, which is an NGO to the UN, which in the United Nations New York Plaza has well, at least I've seen the picture. I don't know if it's still there. I've never been there, but the picture shows me a pistol with a knot tied into it to tell you they don't want you to have a Second Amendment, and you can't, underneath their secure central power. But the problem I have with this hollow point is they're telling you which ammunition you can have. And that's not a limitation anywhere, yet the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals has ruled that that was fine. It's not an infringement. Now, I don't know about you, the hollow points are pretty devastating, and that's really kind of the point, isn't it? You're in a defensive position, and you don't want to give an opportunity to the attacker a second chance. That's why I've really liked, I really never liked a 9mm round. I kind of like a 50-45 hollow point. It kind of puts people into last week pretty quickly. It stops and pushes you back if you're an assailant. It doesn't take 3 passing through and then you fall, bleed to death by the time you come out. No, it stops you and pushes you back, and a hollow point does that faster. On top of the fact that they don't go quite through the wall so fast in case you miss. Hopefully you're on target a bit. You don't have that problem. But they're banning certain types of ammunition that you need to protect yourself. And they've gotten this in San Francisco. So I want you to know, as long as you don't pay attention, things come along, and the Bar Association crowd and their system slowly takes and confines and limits what you can do. I don't know what the grandpa was using against the 3 scumbags. I don't know if he had hollow points or not. Maybe if he didn't, he maybe ought to. Maybe he wouldn't have got shot in response. But the Supreme Court has made certain that at least in San Francisco, the Ninth Circuit, at least in San Francisco, you aren't going to have the benefit, unless you become a criminal, of stopping somebody with a hollow point. Another point, now we're moving into property and who owns it and who controls it. Very interesting set of cases or issues came up, stories that I think you need to pay attention to, because for as much as you're denied property, the corporations are given carte blanche to protect theirs. It seems to be an unreasonable extent to me. GM says that you don't own your car, you just license it. GM has joined with John Deere, so the cancer now is out. The invasion of the inoculate has been put into the corporate system, and it's going to now go through the entire corporate structure, that everyone's going to want theirs, and now they own their property they make is their property forever, apparently. That GM and John Deere are asking the government to confirm that you literally cannot own your car because of the software in its engine. Like John Deere, GM wants to stop the Copyright Office from granting an exemption to the Digital Millennium Copyright Act that would allow you to jailbreak the code in your car's engine so that you can take it to a non-GM mechanic for service or fix it yourself. By controlling who can service your car, then the GM can force you to buy only official, expensive parts, protecting its bottom line. The consumerist quips, GM wants you to know that the car in the driveway is literally not your father's Oldsmobile. Now, let me get quickly back. I'm not going to go through too deep analysis. Copyright is to protect your product from commercial sale. It's to protect the property for a certain amount of time, and under copyright, I think it's up to 50 years now, or 75 years. I can't remember now. They just changed it. That you get protected in your authorship. That they're making a pitch to the fact that the computer software now is not sold when they sell you the car, which is bringing up a whole bunch of things. I don't know. Are they going to now start to tell you that you're just leasing the car from them? And then we have the consumer answer. You don't buy their product. That this is what's going on. These people are now taking power in the property of these laws and taking advantage of them. I don't know what direction this is going to go, but consider the software, the technology that they have. They're saying now that the sale is no longer a sale. That I want you need to keep aware of this is because it's starting to spread out. If they're going to continue to possess what you thought you bought and it's not really a purchase. And the technology that they have under patent is always theirs. Even though this is supposed to be about commercial production of their idea, not the use. In other words, where they may have a patent on how to do a certain process, you can do that process for yourself. That's not against the law. That reprogramming the chip, unless they're going to claim the right of the chip or the programming process, not the program, they can't stop anyway. Because what they sold you in your property, you can erase, you can change, it's not their stuff. They've sold it to you for you to do with what you were supposed to do. You're not reselling it. See, that's what this copyright and patent is supposed to be about. You have a constrained time of private use of your intellectual property. That if you start extending this out to patents and ideas like this next story came up and I started to wonder, what's the limitation? That Levi's is the first official partner of Google's ATAP's Jacquard connected fabric. That Levi's was making fabric, they've designed fabric that's electrically responsive. Google was showing off in its Project Jacquard at I/O 2015 a connected fabric tech that lets you build connected surfaces right into your clothes in a way that makes it easy to connect the devices and power while letting clothes makers make stuff that actually looks good. It seems promising, especially because they're already signed on Levi's as the first partner. The partner is serious here on this international governance level, but understand what they're saying here. If GM is going to claim the software and claim that they only lease and license their stuff to you when you purchase it, then Levi can come along and Google, and they can say they own your clothes. They literally own the shirt on your back now, and they can take it. Understand also, this fabric utilizes Google, and you know Google, they're going to take all this information from you for marketing. The other big data, the other real, probably more serious than NSA problem, that this fabric, the clothes on your body, won't be owned by you if GM and John Deere get their way that way. All these stories came together. Wearables at work now came together. Another story. The new frontier of employee surveillance. Levi is finally contracting with ATAPs for Google has, the big data, the silent weapons of quiet wars. I keep posted on the bottom of the blogcaster. That they own the technology, the clothes on your back, and the employers are going to be pitched to now utilize that technology, that surveillance capacity for where you work. And consider now, it may not be your clothes either. Maybe you'll be wearing a uniform. That wearables at work now comes as a concept. When we have no electrically connective fabric. If you don't see the surveillance world now at every point, I don't know where you are. I don't know what's going on. I don't know what's going to happen. You're going to find that there's not any clothes that the manufacturer doesn't own, or Google doesn't own, and you're going to be required to be wearing it. Eventually, all clothes will be that way. And you think the little credit card you have in your that's radio ID'd, or your driver's license, is an antenna bigger than your whole body? And what about these high technology copyrights that they hold continuous possession over? What happens when they start going wrong? Caught on tape, self-driving car plows into journalists. This is your future, folks. So who's liable for this one now? The software programmer? The radio-controlled misoperator? The maker of the car? Like I was telling you at the Charleston thing, well, the guy put a Confederate flag on the bumper. Maybe we should just go after the company that made the car, and then go after the corporation, the corporations that supplied the making of the car, aiding and abetting the terrorists. Oh, let's go about the country that allowed that corporation. They're aiding and abetting the terrorists. When do we stop? When is a sale a sale? Where does the liability start? You better start considering there's people thinking about this in ways to limit their liability and stick it on you. And here's where it sticks to you. You might be one of the journalists who just got run down. And the question will be, did you get the license of the truck that just run you over? Think about this future that's being made for you, this technocracy, this control structure. It's all here, and we're going to consume it. We're going to suck it right up. We're going to give it animation. And so what can you do about some of this stuff? Well, maybe you can get involved. You can start talking about amicus curiae, so these court cases, and say, hey, listen, this is the way it's supposed to really work, and tell them what the law is. Or you can start calling the GM and say, end your suit, or I'm never going to buy a product. And you start getting enough people saying, I'm not going to buy your product. I'm going to go buy a Tesla car, and I'm not going to buy your Volt. How's that? Until we find out that Elon Musk is doing the same thing. I mean, this is the other problem. Elon Musk is now, I like the guy. I like the ideas. That he's really kind of excites me because he's doing the things that I thought about when I was young to get going. He's actually doing it. I like that part. But the guy's, he's a governance guy. So he's got that problem. Everyone's got this. No one's perfect, right? This is what we have to start paying attention to. We have to understand, think down the road a ways of what are the ramifications. Maybe the technocratic options are not so cool. If the companies are going to go into this possessing everything around you because they have some micro software that can be put in anything, and it's never your stuff, aren't they just delineating you don't have any stuff? And the corporations do. Aren't you seeing the no borders? Aren't you seeing what I've been saying now in reality? Fabricated by us against ourselves. With those that have been sitting in the seats of decision and lobbying those in the seats of decision to work toward that future. And those that are not putting up a resistance, and properly so, are going to live the future they did not obstruct. I don't know. I kind of think of this stuff, and I'm wondering, what else do you say? I mean, you have to do that locally, and that's where we all fight. We can do the national thing. I don't mind having people send stuff over to a congressman. In fact, we work locally with the congressmen, with the senators. You can go to your state capital and say, recall all the senators so they can't agree anymore. If they're not in there to vote, then they can't agree on this nonsense. Giving Satan license to poison you, because the bottom line's more important than your knowledge. Or turn around and become the movement that says, okay, here's how we're going to roll. The companies that don't put non-GMO, have no GMO, if you don't put that on your label, we're not going to buy from you. And if you put that on your label and we catch you with a GMO, we're going to get you for a deception, label liability deception. It's up to us to find the place we want to work with this. If we don't work with this, you're going to be given feed, you're going to be told where to go, and they're going to know about whether or not you're eating your feed and where you went, because they were given the clothes that you want, that you're leasing from the companies, that the software of which is telling them everywhere you are. And I don't think Levi's making their jeans like they used to, that they might last 50 years either, that you're going to get away with it. You're going to be subject. Your clothes will wear out. to my amazement. Sitting here just typing stuff and my clothes wear out. I'm amazed. Why is that? So, this is a planned obsolescence, and they get you into the next new thing, and that's how our life's going to go unless we start putting some resistance to it. Thank you for tuning in today. Certainly support the worldtruth.org and reallibertymedia.com for the servers, and ucy.tv for Jules and her servers. If not, your contributions to markonthebeast@yahoo.com for content or ideas or anything that you also may be interested in and be interested in from you. Take care.
Well, that's another lesson. I hope with today's information you can take it to those that misbehave. From behind the woodshed, leaving his mark on the beast, this is Hal Anthony. Till next time, journey with purpose.
That's what opening up a can of whoop-ass feels like.
Listen, we are your